Demon's Souls Review.
Ah yes, the Soulsborne series, a series often referenced in gaming articles to unintentional comedic relief. It's safe to say that this series has been a landmark on gaming from its early days being an Oblivion killer to rival the Xbox 360's then exclusive, to now being the reason why a lot of people picked up a PS5. I've always wanted to get into this series, but it's been a long road. Originally, I had a friend who was big into the series and wanted to push me in. I tried my hand with Bloodborne, but couldn't get past its jittery frame rate, and being my first time playing a Soulsborne game, left me feeling defeated, and I gave up. Then I tried again with Dark Souls 3, but this time around, I started having motivation problems to play any games. I did try Bloodborne again recently, and had intentions of buying Sekiro, but this didn't go far. Finally, the brand new remake of the game that started it all, Demon's Souls, and it happened. That moment where it all clicked and I had an absolute grand time playing this game. Now, before we get into the review, I must note that I pushed myself through 4 hours of the starting area of Bolterra's Palace to defeating the first boss, Fanlex. Some of this was just from me being straight up bad with the game and lacking an understanding, and some of it was from the game itself. I'll make some points and bring this up later on, but I wanted to make it clear that this is the first time I've had success with a Soulsborne game. To start off with, you're greeted by a gorgeous opening cutscene that plays every time you start up the game, which is reminiscent of PS3 games from the original's era, but I haven't seen this done with a lot more recent releases, so we're already off to a good start by paying homage to the original with this addition. The story that I assume is the same as the original and encompasses the whole universe that I'm sure after watching hours of lore videos I'd have a much clearer understanding of, is great and feels very, very atmospheric and heavily themed. Then I finally got to make my own character. His name is Sir Chomsky, and he shall vanquish all the demons like a Mexican Gatsu, carrying around his oversized bastard sword, which eventually I did upgrade to a claymore. But this is where I found my playstyle mostly. The customization in this game is amazing, and it really made me feel like the character I was creating was my own. I didn't do any research into builds or anything like that, so I just chose the basic soldier class, and I'm not sure how
Toxic.
the community is for this sort of games, but I'm sure that I would make you cringe, and I apologize in advance. I spend most of my time getting a huge feeling of satisfaction whenever I struck down an enemy with a single strike. If any of you are familiar with the Berserk series, I will be referencing it a lot in this video, as it's the only other dark medieval themed media that I really got into except for this game. Diving into Bolterra Palace, I was immediately welcomed and shunned for coming to this place with the game's beautiful atmospheric sound design and roaring orchestrated score. Moving along to the actual game itself, the game feels very responsive. I felt a lot more control in my actions, especially with heavy use of the R3 targeting system. I really only stuck with just big swords, but I did dabble a little bit with bows and arrows, and maybe along the line I might go through a second playthrough and try and stick to just using magic. The game's graphics look fantastic, somehow looking full of life with its little colors sprinkled throughout, and at the same time dirty and reeking of death, with any of its settings leaving the player with an existential feeling of dread. Not too dissimilar to how I already feel whenever I leave my house. Haptic feedback and adaptive triggers were still in line with how it was used in Spider-Man Miles Morales, but it had a unique use of vibrating whenever a projectile was being aimed and fired at you. Other than that, it wasn't used as heavily as Astro's Playroom, but Bluepoint knew who this game was made for, and I think they played their cards right over here when implementing these DualSense features. I wouldn't be surprised if the average From Software enjoyer would care much for these fancy vibration features. Now, as I said at the beginning, it took me 4 hours for me to finally get to Fanlex, and yes, even I know that's pathetic, and I was reminded why I quit Bloodborne, but I just remembered the old saying frequently used within the Soulsborne community: get good. So I persisted, and I took no shame in looking up online guides to work out what I was doing wrong. It turns out that I was actually meant to run across the bridge where the dragon, the very menacing dragon, was breathing fire. So once I worked that out, I defeated Fanlex, who was pretty much a pushover, and I could tell from other players' messages that the experience I got from my two previous From Software games, Bloodborne and DS3, helped me settle in a lot easier than others who potentially are playing a Soulsborne game for the first time. This game is not free of missteps, as all games are. I do take full responsibility that a big part of my struggle with this game was on my part, but other parts of the game didn't help. My number one issue I had with this game was the camera. Whenever I went into closed spaces like hallways that led into towers or the walkways beneath the bridge that I don't know if there's a special word for it because I'm not a bridge maker or anything, I always found myself not only fighting the soul starve, but the camera and lock-in system whenever I was in these tight spaces. This never led to me dying, but with the inclusion of only being able to roll when locked onto an enemy, made the Tower Knight fight a bit of a learning experience. Another issue, but this time being minor, was I got lost a handful of times due to the lack of any modern map system, but I'm not sure if this is staying true to the original, but after a while, I had no problem, as frequent deaths, as what the series is known for, made me slowly remember the layout of each area. To counter any arguments, I think it's part of the experience to remember these levels from dying so often. Speaking of guides, the PS5's premium guide feature was leaving something to be desired. When I did use it, all of the guides for Bolteria were redundant as I had already passed those parts. Maybe what I was looking for was in the written part, but I found it much easier still to just look it up myself. And as I said before, I have no shame looking at guides in general, as I believe this series can be cryptic, even though my issue was just because Red Dragon was scary and I was not aware I had to run across the bridge. I'm nowhere near finishing this game, and I'm even hesitant to attempt to earn its platinum, but I believe with the 10 hours I've played, I've gotten more than a taste of the overall experience, moving past Bolterra, going into the mining sections. I'm hoping I can make the time to at least finish this game once, but despite some issues, this is an amazing experience, and I finally feel indoctrinated to the Soulsborne community, and I can't wait to finish this game and maybe even go back and push through Bloodborne and finally zip into Sekiro. I can easily recommend this game to anyone under the knowledge that this is a much more different and difficult experience, and suffering is part of the fun. It has camera issues that feel a bit dated, and I still think a guide is necessary. Not counting the one on the PS5 system, of course. It's an excellent experience that relies on your patience to get the full experience. I'm giving Demon's Souls a 9.2. Check it out if you're up for the challenge. I don't see why this couldn't have been a PS4 game as well though. My guess is that Sony wanted a lot of killer exclusives, and if you're not up for the ball crushing in this game, Miles Morales would have been another option, but I don't see why this absolutely had to be next gen only. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time when I'm summarizing this month, November 2020. See you around.